From there, it was, I learned a great deal out of that. I learned too about, how important collaboration and co-design is, working with. Sometimes contracts get signed and then don't get looked at until it's ready for renewal again. What you've got to do is make sure that people are compliant, that your supply chain is compliant, that they're delivering when they say they're going to deliver, that you're getting the right product delivered at the right time for the cost that you pay for.
Welcome back to our podcast, Talking Aged Care. We're really pleased to have Mr. LinkedIn himself, Sean Matthews, on our episode today. Sean, could you please start off and tell our listeners a bit about yourself and your career journey across the various organisations you've worked with?
Sure, Mark. Thanks for having me. Look, I've had a really good career path and it's still going. I started off many years ago working for a company called BrightSky Australia, which was part of the Paraplegic Quadriplegic Association in New South Wales. And we started up a commercial division of the organisation to support it commercially and return money back into people who had spinal cord injury. So gave me the first step into that care area where we were the first organisation to have home care delivery, where we were supplying wound care and nutrition and continence and all those things for people at home, directly at home, who couldn't get to the pharmacy. So that was a great stepping stone, a great opportunity there. And then I moved into working for companies like Bunzl Outsourcing Services, which was a great learning area and a great company to work for. Learned a lot about working collaboratively as a team, backing yourself, making sure that when you focus on the customer, that the customer's outcomes are driven by our understanding. So that was really good, and dealing with the resilience of hard times and how to manage through those, especially when you had contract renewals and so forth. So it was really good. And then I sort of followed on from there, and then went over to Wink Australia, and I was lucky. I got hired to be the head of care, which was right down my angle. It was a vertical business that had started up, and they wanted somebody that could lead it with education, training, letting people know. Our business there was about supply chain, so supplying stationery, healthcare products, everything that had to do with operating an aged care or healthcare organisation. So from there, it was, I learned a great deal out of that. I learned too about, how important collaboration and co-design is, working with the people there at Wink. And it was, a great thing. I pride myself on the fact that when I got to know all the people in the building, we had a three-level building, and I made sure I got to know everybody pretty well. And that helps with when you want to get things done and progress things. And you really work with people and really understand what motivates them and drives them. So that was a really good thing. And then from there, I went into technology. So started off, before that, I was the director of business development for Team Teach, which was a behaviour support training company that was based out of the UK and was driven about, focusing on behaviour support regarding teachers, people in dealing with disability, NDIS, those sorts of areas, and giving them the tools to handle situations that are behaviour driven. So that was great. And we did a lot of training and built the New Zealand Australian market, which was fantastic. Also taught me a lot about how challenging it is when you work remotely. In between those times, shortly after Wink, before I started with the director of Team Teach, I ran my own consulting business called Banksia Consulting. Ran that for 2 years, and that was just mind-blowing post-COVID. It was really just a really good opportunity to deliver on everything that I've learned over the years working with companies. So it was really a real good opportunity to make that shine, and had a good time. Just decided that it was time for me to go back in, and then I got an opportunity to join Team Teach. Was there for a few years, learned a great deal, especially around dealing with managing directly with boards. Then I moved on to working with Talius Technology. I learned more about the advanced nurse call systems and the technology involved in that. And then currently now at Smart Caller, working as a National Business Development Manager, focusing on the advanced technology and nurse calls, real-time location systems, and wearable devices and focusing on the technology and the advancement in aged care.
Thanks for that rundown in regards to your background, and you said a real few critical points there that I wanted to pick up. And you work for some huge companies, national companies like Bunzl, for example. I can remember the days when I was in FM, and that was on a national basis. They won the tender for that specific organisation I was working for that had 60 odd racks, residential aged care facilities. So huge organisations. But you made a really good point there, and I firmly believe in this. You can work for the best company in the world who have a track record, shiny website, good products, good service, but people buy from people. So if you don't have that respect and understanding, you're a likable guy, Sean. I know we've been connected on LinkedIn for some time. We met up recently at the Sydney conference, but I think it's something which we don't talk enough about, but respect, having mutual respect for someone, saying what you're going to do. And it's amazing in the current age of AI and tech, people still buy from people.
They do.
You say what you
They do, Mark. And look, that's never more important than right now. I think people just, and they've got to enjoy working with you. And that trust that people have that you're going to say what you're going to do and do what you're going to say and actually deliver when you need to. And it's also having those hard conversations when it's not going the way it should go. And I think people respect that. And I think out of all the learnings of working with the companies that I've worked with, I think the thing is you've got to stick back yourself and say that, your values are a lot higher than, you keep your values at a level that you would be, that your family would be proud of. And I think,
correct.
that's important.
Yeah, that's right. And, you've been involved in aged care through, various different lenses in terms of procurement tech. If you had to, I guess, sum it up in 3 points, what key changes have you observed in the sector over the past decade?
Observed where in aged care?
Yeah, in the aged care sector over the past
Look,
decade.
I think it's changed massively because it's gone through a transformation of being person-centred. Obviously, the Royal Commission had a big impact on the change that happened, but it's been the transformation around focusing on person-centered care and then delivering when you've got limited workforce or the workforce is a challenge for aged care is how do you make do with less and how do you do more to make sure that the care that you're spending with the resident is something that's quality time. So, the challenges are regulatory as well. The regulatory demands rigors that have been put on aged care post the commission, they're all having a major impact in how things are going. But the movement now is more towards the transformation of aged care. So it's into technology. It's looking at all the things, advancements in technology of how they can manage things with the people that they've got, do it better. And so that the families, the residents are the ones that are well off, but also that it also helps organisations with their cost base. So, having that ability to use the technology in a way that it's fit for purpose and that it provides efficiency, but it also allows people to provide that quality of care.
No, very well said. And I know you were working obviously in the sector during COVID, and I can recall before obviously getting into recruitment and advisory, I was managing a facility in rural Vic, and this was just at the start of COVID, and I can recall how challenging it was to get PPE. Like if you had PPE, and whether it was gloves, aprons, masks, hand sanitizer, you were doing really well, and even at the time, the national stockpile was merely a website. You could get a little bit, but it wasn't enough. It was sort of like, you had to feed 10 people, but you only had enough for 1.5 sort of thing. What sort of challenges did you sort of see during that time and how did you respond to the needs of your clients?
Well, I was right in the midst of that and I was working for a company that did supply gloves and things. I think the challenge comes when we foresaw the COVID. As soon as we started getting news that COVID was going to be a big thing, the whole process was around how do we get more product in very quickly and to an order that we're able to supply. And I think the challenge was there, the ones that worked quickly and did heed to all the warnings, did buy up a lot of stock and then was able to supply. But the supply chain, we're driven by a lot of things get manufactured from overseas. We don't, and this is one of the key challenges we have moving forward in this country around if things go wrong and we don't have our own supply chain within our country, then we're relying on the supply chain coming from overseas. Now, in a pandemic situation, when the country's shut off, the other countries aren't going to be, they're going to be looking to look after themselves rather than look after us. So hence
That's right.
the delay. The challenge we've got in the future is thinking about let's start planning and being able to have that supply chain. I think a lot of companies have learned a lot from COVID and have changed their ability. But also, by the same token, there were a lot of people that was sort of like a bit like the toilet paper issue during COVID. People were just trying to grab anything they could, huge amounts, and it was just put so much pressure on the supply chain that it just challenged it. And I think in moving forward, I think a lot of people have learned from that. And I think if there was to be anything down the track, I think we're probably more prepared to deal with it than we've ever. It was a 1 in 100-year type pandemic. It was something that nobody foresaw, or the challenges, but it did undo a lot of interesting things about our weakness when it comes to our manufacturing in our own country. And that's a big challenge.
No, very well said. And I think, there is a great resilience, and not just from here in Australia, but a lot of countries have almost given in a way, other countries have a monopoly on the market in terms of where we source, our goods from. And that's talking about everything from clothes to aged care, PPE, etc. So I think you made a really valid point in terms of a roadmap moving forward. And it was I hope, a once in a lifetime event that we occurred with the outbreak in COVID. But you're right. I think we really need to look at projection planning and contingencies to see potentially what we can do here in our own shores. And yes, it's always going to come down to cost, but I always look at in the accounting terms, COGS, cost of goods or services. Yes, item costs will cost more to manufacture here, will also give more jobs, but what's the cost of losing lives when you can't equip the floors with basic things that you need to ensure that infection control is kept in place? So I agree. Very well said. Moving on to the next question that I wanted to ask you, with your background supporting aged care providers, what do you see as the biggest challenges they're facing today? So that's the first question. And how can suppliers and partners better support them?
I guess the biggest challenge that it's really around workforce shortages. That's the biggest challenge, is finding quality staff to support that. I think the other thing is looking at, the increasing, they're looking for more skilled staff as well, because the increase in regulatory requirements has just become so over. Not that it's not important, but I think that the real driver is that there's a lot that they have to unpack and make sure that they're compliant with the government in order to get funding, to keep that funding going. So that's a challenge. I guess the other thing is just the upgrading of infrastructure in aged care as well, and keeping the aged care organisations in a situation. What you're going to find is there's a lot more of the smaller ones will be acquired by the larger ones, or they may just shut down completely. That's the reality of what's going to happen in the future. Getting back to, I guess, and the other thing too is you're looking at the transformation of technology and the how quick and fast it seems to be occurring. Grabbing what's fit for purpose, not grabbing the next shiny thing that's coming along and thinking that that's going to be the wonderful thing. Because I think the other thing aged care providers have had is a challenge around dealing with being burnt by technology, taking on things that, and I wrote in an article, I wrote on LinkedIn the other day about the imposter syndrome, and sometimes you really find the real imposters when things don't go to plan and there hasn't been proper planning been involved. I'm not saying that that's a general overview, but it's generalised by things that happen that I've seen happen in the aged care sector. So there's been these real challenges there. Getting back to what suppliers and partners can do, I think it's important that they work with organisations on solving their problems. I think in this industry we should be, and what we do, we're problem solvers. So we're sitting there, you've got a problem, let's work on what that solution might look like, and let's co-design that together. A lot of, if you do sit down, and I've been an advocate of doing this with a lot of organisations, and even in my consulting days, there were times where we were looking at aged care providers and finding that there was a lot of overspend in areas that they could have got a better deal, or they could have reduced costs. And that was done through the fact that they were, I guess, used to doing certain things a certain way and didn't like change. And change to them is you've got to take them along the journey and take them to where you want to go. Because unfortunately, if you don't get that buy-in, anything that you try to implement will get challenged in an aged care environment. And so it should be. But by the same token, what you're trying to do is to get to a goal where you're going to save some money that can be reinvested in another area of the organisation to support good things like lifestyle, like all the things that provide quality person-centred care.
Thanks, Sean. No, very, very well said. I completely agree, especially focusing on the areas in a residential aged care facility which have a big impact emotionally, lifestyle, and making sure that care staff are the most amount of time. And you touched on it, and it's been a constant theme through every guest that we've had on Talking Aged Care regarding workforce. And it could be, we're talking specifically today, about supply chain, resilience, procurement, etc. But it's always there. That constant theme is there. But on that topic, supply chain resilience, you've worked at big organizations, Wink, Bunzl. What should aged care providers keep in mind regarding supply chain resilience? What lessons have you learned about procurement and supply chain resilience?
Well, I guess they've got to keep a focus on the contracts that they've got in place for supply. Make sure that they're getting the right value that sometimes contracts get signed and then don't get looked at until it's ready for renewal again. What you've got to do is make sure that people are compliant, that your supply chain is compliant, that they're delivering when they say they're going to deliver, that you're getting the right product delivered at the right time for the cost that you pay for. I think that the challenge, when you're doing all of that, is you get caught up in BAU, and the general business of things. But if you're focused on those, you can make sure that your costs are at a level where you're getting value for what you're getting, and also having a good relationship with your suppliers, having a really good robust, any innovation that comes through, that they're bringing that to you. There's areas of cost that can be taken out of the business that they can help you with. And it could be as simply as how many orders are you being delivered to a facility. If you've got 4 or 5 deliveries from the same company, then you've got to start looking at where you're going to store stuff and look at one order a week, and that'll help reduce your costs. You're looking at your invoicing system, making sure that when you're paying your bills, is there any discount if you pay earlier instead of dragging things out and holding on to the money. All these things are aspects of how financial prudence in an aged care environment, but also working well with your supply partners is critical, because they're the ones that can provide that the innovation and the cost benefit.
Really well said there. I just want to pick you up on that point there. And it casts me back to my time working as an FM when there were deliveries, and often the deliveries were, whilst they tried to be pre-scheduled, they often came just when the maintenance officer or manager was finishing. And often you had this mad rush trying to keep the maintenance officer in the facility, ask them to stay on, and the poor care staff members being roped in to help. And then obviously you have the work health and safety implications. You have, not specific, particularly there could be different lifting techniques, potential areas of risk. So even though it just sounds quite simple and mundane, it's so important, and it gets back to those life principles of mastering the basics. And you made a good point there. If you haven't got enough space, how many aged care facilities have we both been to when you go to see, for example, where the hoists are kept and the floors are damaged, the walls are, it looks like it's a, 60-year-old room because of the damage, and it's just everything shoved into this tiny room. But I think you're right, especially with new builds that are coming on. And I know a lot of aged care facilities are trying to put, for example, tracks in the rooms to make it easier, and to reduce those spaces. But I always believe, and you've mentioned this a few times, Sean, and I firmly believe and agree with you, that co-design is so important. Often, and we should never forget the little guy. And what I mean by that is, when it comes down to commissioning a new facility, having the architect, chief of ops, whoever's there, you need to have a care staff member in lifestyle, because they're the ones that will say, hey, where do we put the hoist, for example? Where do we fit this? And it changes things. Yes, aesthetically, a facility needs to look good, but it needs to be practical and fit for you. So really good point there. So, yeah.
Well, it becomes critical. An example was I was working with Ramsay Healthcare at one stage, and their thing was that when it came to contract renewal, they knew that we were definitely delivering on time, that everything was being delivered on time. So the KPIs were being met consistently. The cost of change for them would be, if we change to something and it doesn't work out, we're going to be stuffed. So what you always put in the mind of the aged care provider is the fact that I'm doing the best service I can provide you, holds me to account, but it also manages to deliver exactly what you need. And then it makes it near impossible for a company to say, well, yeah, aside from reducing price and dropping your costs and looking cost efficient, which we did, they re-signed without an issue. And that was some years ago when I was at Bunzl. But that's the sort of sort of thing that you look at when you've got to over deliver. And if you over deliver your customers, and this is,
I agree.
it's prevalent in anything you do, over deliver on the promise. If you do that and work with and have a good relationship and a really good open communication with your customers, then everything sort of, you build strong and long lasting and sustainable business.
I couldn't agree more. And that there are aspects of basic sales, but just basic humanity and common courtesy. Like you said, just do what you say you're going to do. And if you do make a mistake, own it. Like you said, you might have hard conversations, or you may have a contractor, for example, pest control, that hasn't, dodged a few corners and they haven't been compliant. But I don't think sometimes contractors realize the bigger picture. So, for example, especially national providers, or any providers that have sort of 5 or more homes, one person doing the wrong thing could potentially have devastating effects on renewals, on the impact. So I believe in the compounding effect and what you've said. I wanted to ask you, Sean, and really enjoy your posts on LinkedIn, especially the motivational ones on a Monday when you're going for a run. I started running and had to pause with my fitness and the odd plantar injury under the left foot, but we'll get back into it. But I wanted to ask you, what's your advice? So sort of what would your advice be, and what would you offer to emerging leaders or innovators looking to make a meaningful impact in the aged care sector?
Look, I would suggest just understand and work with organisations. I mean, I've had good relationships with some of the really good CEOs in aged care, and it just really is. And don't pretend you know everything. You don't. Nobody knows everything, and so
Very well said.
it's always good to seek advice. There's a
Correct.
couple of really good CEOs that I seek advice from. Don't be afraid to do that sort of thing. But I think most importantly, don't go with the idea that you're there to sell them something, or that you're trying to drive something that they want that you don't necessarily understand that they need. And also focus on the fact that we're here to help solve a problem. How do we work in, and I'm going to use this term again, co-design, because it's an equal partnership here. What are we doing that's going to help you to deliver the results you need for your organisation? If you don't have that, then you're really going to struggle with the outcomes that you're desiring.
I agree, Sean. I think, we've in this short yet impactful episode, we've really covered quite a lot in terms of your background, your experience, understanding procurement from end to end, honoring on those promises, and not thinking that you have everything because you have a contract in place. You mentioned about the retentions, and when you're at Bunzl, how easy it was for you to get, clients to re-sign documents and continue their service agreements because you delivered upon what you said. You talked a lot about co-design, collaboration, all really useful points for anyone in the sector, especially regarding procurement teams, supply chain departments and divisions. But finally, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience, perhaps a personal insight or message for aged care professionals navigating today's challenges?
Look, I think be a little bit open-minded to fresh ideas. Don't be caught up in, yes, you've been in the industry for 20 years. Yes, you've been there, and you know what you've been doing inside and out. Sometimes it's often people with fresh ideas that just deliver gold for organizations. So be open-minded to that. From a supplier perspective, if you're supplying technology, products, health and hygiene, all those sorts of things, just make sure that, when you go to deliver the items, that you're understanding that you're supporting them, that this is what you're delivering on. It's so important that you understand the process of what they're going through, and understanding a bit more about the challenges they're facing, but also work, the communication, collaboration, co-design, and just generally being open and not having all the answers is perfect. If you're going into to work with any of the aged care providers, it's going in with that understanding, but having that empathy too, an empathetic view, because some of these people that are in that aged care facility have been, like you're right, through no fault of their own, as they age and become frail, they're in a situation. It's understanding
That's
that
right.
overall what we're trying to do is provide services that make them have a good quality of life till end of life. So that's important. And I think if you know that and you understand the journey, and we're not just selling widgets or products and things, and we're thinking that that's the end of it, we've got to look at what's the total big picture at the end of the day. And that is, these people, what you're doing is going to make a difference to the people's lives that you're indirectly impacting.
I agree, Sean. Very eloquently put. Just wanted to say a big thank you for joining us on this episode of Talking Age Care. I can also see in the background there's a blue scarf, so you go for
Carlton.
the blues. No, very good. I was hoping it was more, state of origin. So I'll
I've
think
got
of it.
the other blue one in there. So hopefully we'll win the third one in Sydney, which would be great.
No, that's right. That's why we had you in the episode, because you're not a Queenslander, supporter. Only kidding. But thanks, Sean. Really appreciate your time, and look forward to hearing more from you and your journey, and to our community and to our audience out there. This episode has really highlighted specific aspects of procurement, supply chain, resilience, understanding clients' needs. For further information, feel free to like and subscribe. Equally, Sean will be in the comments, his name, so feel free to connect and go from there.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Sean. Take care.